Central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, will make it possible for governments to control how much you spend and even how much you can save. This is not a conspiracy theory, it's in their own documentation. Now, the digital euro has been the most infamous CBDC in this regard, as the European Central Bank, or ECB, has been explicit in its intentions to use the digital euro for control ever since it started working on it. Recently, the ECB published its first progress report on the digital euro's preparation phase, and today we're going to summarize that report, reveal when the digital euro will launch, and explain how you can prepare. Let's start with a quick recap. Like most central banks, the ECB's interest in a CBDC began back in 2019 when Facebook revealed its digital currency, Libra. Like most central banks, the ECB saw Libra and other private currencies, like cryptocurrencies, as a threat to their public currencies, in this case, the euro. And like most central banks, the ECB decided that developing a CBDC was the best way to protect its public currency against competition from private currencies. Now, the ECB seems to have made this decision in late 2021, which is not surprising as this was the peak of the crypto bull market, so peak fear for the ECB. Then, in the summer of 2022, the ECB published a paper on what its digital euro could look like. If you've been keeping up with our digital euro updates, you'll know that this paper was seriously dystopian. It included things like phasing out cash, replacing stores of value like gold, and addressing, quote, moral hazards. In other words, not allowing you to buy too much meat or have that extra beer at the bar. Then, in the autumn of 2022, the ECB published its first working paper on what the digital euro will look like. While it didn't include things like phasing out cash, it did include limits on holdings and transactions, zero privacy, and programmability, i.e. controlling what you can buy, when you can buy it, and where you can buy it. In other words, still not allowing you to buy too much meat or have that extra beer at the bar. In early 2023, the ECB published its second working paper on what the digital euro will look like. This paper was surprisingly watered down, as it specified that the ECB would only handle digital euro issuance and settlement. Everything else would be handled by participating commercial banks. In mid-2023, the ECB published its third working paper on what the digital euro will look like. It was even more watered down, which was not surprising given the PR disaster at the time. The peak of this disaster was ECB President Christine Lagarde admitting on video that the digital euro would be used for control. Obviously, most of the bad PR came from the digital euro's programmability aspects, which the ECB renamed to, quote, conditional payments. The ECB insists that conditional payments and programmable payments are two different things, even though they're functionally identical. Both allow for control. Of course, there is a technical difference, and that's that commercial banks, not the ECB, would implement conditional payments. This would make it possible for the ECB to avoid any responsibility for any dystopian features its digital euro could have, even though it's providing the tools for these controls. Very sneaky. Anyways, shortly after the ECB's third working paper, it tabled two regulatory proposals for EU politicians to ponder. The first involved the creation of a digital euro, and the second involved ensuring Europeans have a right to use cash. It's assumed that it will take at least 2 years for the combined proposal to pass. That's why the ECB announced the beginning of the digital euro's preparation phase in late 2023. As the name suggests, the preparation phase essentially involves developing the digital euro so that it's ready to launch if EU politicians approve its creation. Naturally, it's assumed that they will approve it. Per the document announcing the start of the preparation phase, the digital euro will be rolled out in the Eurozone, followed by non-euro countries. It will have a €3,000 limit on holdings to start with. It will only be possible to have one digital euro account, and it may be connected to the EU's digital ID wallets. In case you missed the news, the EU recently approved the launch of digital IDs across the continent, and this requires every European country to have a digital ID by May 2026. Digital IDs are likely a prerequisite to the launch of the digital euro, as they need to keep track of who exactly is holding digital euros. You can learn more about the EU's dystopian digital ID wallet using the link in the description, and while you're down there, thump that like button if you're enjoying the video, subscribe to the channel, and ping that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. This brings me to the ECB's first progress report on the digital euros preparation phase. It was published late last month, and we'll leave a link to the full report in the description if you're interested. We'll also leave a link to a debate about the digital euro by EU politicians from last November down there as well. This is because that debate showcased exactly why the ECB wants a digital euro so badly. As mentioned earlier, the central bank wants a CBDC because it's terrified of private forms of money, like crypto, competing with the euro. The catch is that existing digital payments are private money too. Put simply, the money in your bank and the money on your credit or debit card is privately issued money. By contrast, cash is public money. It is literally created by the central bank. This means that if payments were ever to go 100% digital, there would be no more public money, only private money. Put differently, the ECB is just as terrified as we are that cash will disappear because it will lose control. More about the secret companies that printed all the money in the description too. I digress. Now, from the ECB's perspective, the only way to keep its control is through a CBDC. Per the introduction of its first preparation phase report, quote, "A digital euro would reduce our dependence on the large, non-European private payment providers that currently dominate the European landscape. Translation, we don't want American-owned commercial banks and payment processors to be in control of all the digital money in the future." The report then goes on to reiterate that the preparation phase will last until October 2025 and will involve creating a digital euro rulebook, as well as selecting companies that will actually build the digital euro. It also reiterates that the actual launch of the digital euro will be decided by EU politicians, not the ECB. Now, in the second part of the report, the authors unpack aspects related to privacy, which appear to have been even more watered down. In case it wasn't clear enough, CBDCs will not be private. In the case of the digital euro, commercial banks will handle the KYC, while the ECB will see all the transactions. That's why the EU is trying to appease the public by making it possible to have offline payments in digital euros, which will be completely private. Per the report, quote, "The use of digital euro for offline payments would not involve sharing personal transaction data with payment service providers, such as banks, the Eurosystem, or any potential providers of supporting services. As for the online payments, meanwhile, the EU confirms what I just told you. The commercial banks will handle the user data, and the ECB will be able to see all the transactions." In theory, this means that the ECB won't be able to connect transactions to individual accounts. In practice, crypto proves that this would in fact be easy to do. Newsflash: most crypto transactions are public, and you need to complete KYC to buy or sell crypto in most cases. On that note, you should know that the Coin Bureau Deals page has trading fee discounts of up to 70% and sign-up bonuses of up to $100,000 on the best crypto exchanges. These deals are only available for our viewers and are for a limited time only, so take advantage of them using the link down below. Sorry, couldn't resist. Now, what's telling is that the report notes that the ECB is looking into different ways that it could make transactions pseudonymous. This suggests that the central bank hasn't even begun working on the digital euros technology. This is why many EU politicians believe it won't launch until 2028 or 2029. More importantly, it suggests that EU politicians may not know what they're voting for until it's launched. And if you somehow think privacy will be possible with the digital euro, then you probably haven't heard of every central banker's best friend, fraud detection tools. If you watched our video about FedNow, you'll know that it will leverage such tools and that such tools require total surveillance of transactions. But back to those offline payments. The third part of the report dives deeper into this novel idea and explains that it would, quote, enable payments to be made without an internet connection, for example, at close range, in locations with limited network coverage and in the event of power cuts. That is some very peculiar wording there. Power cuts, not power outages. Almost as if the EU will limit energy use. Probably nothing. In any case, the authors explain that digital euro payments would require pre-funding your digital euro wallet using your bank account or an ATM. Logically, offline payments would be completely peer-to-peer and would be done using NFC, i.e. tapping your phone on the device you want to send a payment to. If you somehow think offline payments will make the digital euro less dystopian, then you probably haven't heard of the, quote, secure element that the ECB wants to be installed on all our devices. In fact, the report notes the ECB wants regulations that will allow it to modify existing device hardware. Put differently, the ECB wants to modify the chips in your phone to support the digital euro. Yikes. As a cherry on top, the ECB wants to find ways to introduce fraud detection mechanisms to offline payments, namely when funding or defunding an offline wallet. For what it's worth, it looks like the ECB is still working on a debit card for the digital euro that will have this functionality, so no phone tampering. This ties in to the fourth part of the report, which is about that aforementioned digital euro handbook. Per the report, quote, a single set of rules, standards and procedures to standardize digital euro payments across the euro area is being developed. Interestingly, the first draft of this rulebook was published earlier this year. It included basics like the flow of a digital euro transaction between online and offline wallets, and more complex stuff like potential technical architectures for the digital euro. Note that the ECB doesn't know if it will use a blockchain. The report reveals that the ECB is working with so-called stakeholders to develop a second rulebook that will include things like user experience, testing processes, and integrations with existing infrastructure like ATMs. Note that stakeholder is a term used by the World Economic Forum, or WEF. More about the WEF and its stakeholder capitalism using the link in the description. Moving on. Now, in the fifth part of the report, the authors expand on how the ECB will select companies to work on the digital euro. They reveal that the ECB is already looking for companies to develop core technologies, including offline payments and those pesky fraud protection tools. What's fascinating is that the authors seem to imply that the digital euro's technology will ultimately depend on the companies it picks to develop it. And this reminds us of how the BRICS' Enbridge CBDC system pilot was built by consensus. Lo and behold, Enbridge is a private and permissioned fork of Ethereum. And this relates to the sixth part of the report, which is about other aspects related to the digital euro's design. The first aspect is something I mentioned earlier, and that's the limits on digital euro holdings. Like the motivations behind launching the digital euro, the reasons for its limitations are quite elaborate. At first glance, it looks like the reason for limiting digital euro holdings is just to control people. Upon closer inspection, however, you realize that large digital euro holdings could cause the European banking system to collapse. Conversely, no digital euros means the ECB loses control of digital payments. Now, the specific reasons for this are outside the scope of this video, but they were explained in the ECB's hair-raising digital euro paper from August 2022, which we also summarized. The TLDR is that banks could lose billions in bank deposits, forcing the ECB to do all sorts of crazy stuff like buy stocks to give to banks. Now, what's eye-opening is that the €3,000 limit apparently isn't set in stone, at least according to the report. This might have something to do with the fact that some research suggests that this low limit could be enough to cause 70% of European banks to go under during a financial crisis. I repeat, allowing Europeans to hold just a few thousand digital euros would be enough to cause the European banking system to implode. This begs the question of why the ECB insists on launching a digital euro given these risks, especially because part of its mandate is to ensure financial stability. As we've learned, the answer seems to be because the ECB doesn't want the financial system to become controlled by private banks. From what we were able to gather, the ECB is concerned that private banks will keep acting irresponsibly by taking on excessive debt, etc., because they know they'll be bailed out. Food for thought. Anyhow, the seventh part of the report is about the discussions the ECB has had with EU politicians about the digital euro's technical aspects. The authors start by saying that there's broad support for a digital euro among EU politicians. Note, this could have changed after the recent EU elections. Regardless, you'll recall that EU politicians aren't entirely sure what they're voting for, as the technical aspects of the digital euro haven't been decided. It seems that the ECB's solution to this is to speak directly with them about these details. Some would say it's best to have this kind of stuff in writing. To be fair, that's kind of what the authors have done with this report. So far, it seems they've confirmed with EU politicians that there will only be one digital euro account per person. They've also confirmed that, quote, anyone in the euro area would be able to open a digital euro account. Now, this is extremely significant wording, as it suggests that you won't need to be a citizen of a European country to have a digital euro account. Some would argue that this opens the door to some very controversial foreign and domestic policy decisions, but well, let's not go down that rabbit hole. Now, what's odd is that the ECB seems to be open to the idea of allowing people to have multiple digital euro accounts so long as the total holdings do not exceed the undecided holding limit. By the sound of it, though, the ECB wants to make this hard to do, probably because it would make things harder to track. Similarly, the ECB has confirmed with EU politicians that at the base layer, the digital euro would be free to use, i.e. there would be no transaction fees for users. Payment service providers would still be able to charge a fee for any related services, but the ECB will decide the maximum they can charge. Typical. Finally, the ECB has confirmed with EU politicians that the digital euro will be accessible through both regular banking apps as well as a custom-made digital euro app, which is apparently different from the EU's digital ID. The ECB pinky promises not to compete with regular banking apps with its own app. And this reminds me of something we've said in our previous digital euro updates. Initially, the digital euro will just be another tab in your bank account. Eventually, it will be the only tab in your bank account. Never forget. And this pertains to what comes next, which is revealed in the final part of the report. The roadmap for the remainder of the digital euro's preparation phase can be seen here. As you can see, the immediate focus seems to be figuring out how many digital euros people can hold without collapsing the financial system. How much do you want to bet that they'll get it wrong? Anyhow, the next stage will involve creating documentation about the digital euro and doing research involving actual users. After that, the digital euro rulebook will be updated and the companies to build it will be selected. Then the rulebook will be finalized along with the digital euro's architecture. And last but not least, a decision will be made by the Governing Council and EU politicians on whether or not to issue a digital euro. This will happen in late 2025. Between now and then, the ECB plans on publishing additional digital euro progress reports, with the next one scheduled for release this autumn. The ECB will also continue to consult with those stakeholders, and the report reveals that this includes other central banks. What's funny is that this doesn't include the general public, which the ECB says it will instead educate to ensure that we have all the, quote, correct information. So, the big questions. When will the digital euro launch? and how can you prepare? Well, in case you missed it, it looks like the digital euro won't be launching until later this decade at the earliest. Notably, this is much later than the 2026 timeframe the ECB initially had in mind. Regarding how you can prepare, meanwhile, the honest answer is that you may not need to, because it's looking increasingly likely that the digital euro will never see the light of day. Everyone, even hardcore EU politicians, can see that the average person doesn't need a digital euro and would probably never use it. And it's becoming increasingly clear to everyone that the risks of issuing a digital euro are incredibly high, particularly for the banks. Some of you might recall headlines from earlier this year about banks opposing the digital euro. Besides financial stability risks, it would also cut their profits. What's amusing is that the ECB and other entities affiliated with the central bank have been publishing their own research papers trying to prove that the digital euro's risks won't be as bad as the commercial banks make them out to be. It seems they forget about their own earlier works which underscored these risks. What's hilarious is that these earlier works reveal just how much the ECB hates commercial banks and their ilk. To refresh your memory, that August 2022 paper referred to commercial banks and payment processors as, quote, monopolists who are just trying to game the system to maximize profits. Now, there is certainly some truth to this, but it's also true that both the ECB and the EU are obsessed with controlling as much as they can. This is evident in everything from the Digital Markets Act, which cracks down on tech companies, to the Digital Services Act, which decides what information you can see online. As that viral saying goes, the US innovates, China replicates, and the EU regulates. As we've highlighted in our other CBDC videos, the fundamental problem here is that public currencies are incapable of competing with private currencies in the modern day. If they were, then the ECB and other central banks wouldn't need CBDCs. Everyone would naturally gravitate towards public currencies. But as time goes on, everyone is gravitating towards private alternatives like cryptocurrencies. Central banks and governments don't seem to understand that this is happening because their currencies suck. Instead of trying to improve their currencies, though, they're trying to restrict access to the competition. And this effect is acute in the ECB's case because the euro is built on shaky ground. It's a currency shared by 20 countries but controlled by a single central bank. As the fiscal policies of euro countries and monetary policies of the ECB continue to diverge, the euro will become increasingly unstable. To be blunt, there's a good chance that the euro won't exist as a currency by the time the digital euro is ready to be rolled out. Then again, the euro could have gotten to a stage where the average European is begging for an alternative currency, and the ECB could try to present its digital euro as a solution. Thankfully, though, alternatives will exist, and chances are that Europeans will have adopted them long before that. And that's all for today's video. So if you learned something new, hammer that like button to let us know. If you want to keep learning, subscribe to the channel and ping that notification bell. And if you want to help others learn about the digital euro, then be sure to share this video with them. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Guy, over and out.